Live from the world headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, this is the news with Rick Sanchez.
Okay, hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez, and I want to welcome you watching us from all over the United States and all over the world, whether you're watching us on regular TV or on the portable app. So, we're going to be drilling down on the spike today on COVID-19 cases, also on the dispute between the United States and the International Criminal Court, and on a place in Seattle that's been turned into a perpetual protest zone. But we're going to begin with another example of the United States being challenged. More than 100,000 of you have watched and commented on the story that we did earlier this week about China unloading part of its share of the U.S. debt that it owns, right? It did so because it believes that the United States dollar is about to be horribly devalued because of what the Fed is doing by printing so much money seemingly out of thin air. They're probably right. The U.S. dollar will undoubtedly at some point be worth less and may eventually be pushed out as the only world currency, probably by China, maybe in the next 10 to 15 years. But here's today's development. It appears that there's another player in the world stage that's making a similar move. Russia is now sending signals of no confidence in the U.S. dollar as well, and it's doing so in a different way. See, the Russian parliament has now officially cleared the way for the country to double its supply of gold. What it is essentially doing is it's removing the barriers, including taxes, so that Russia can accelerate its gold buying spree. The Kremlin has made de-dollarization, as it's been called, a long-term priority. It's been going on since 2013. But now, given what's happening in the United States economy, it seems to be doubling down, is Russia. So where is this leading? And what is this eventually going to mean for the U.S. and for the global economy? We're going to break this down for you right here on the News with Rick Sanchez, where we believe it's time to do news again. Here's our list of the questions that we think you'll be asking tomorrow after watching our newscast today. Can the United States dollar survive the challenge from China and now from Russia? Why is COVID-19 resurging throughout the United States, and what's it doing to the markets? Why is the United States in a spat with the International Criminal Court? Look, there is no question that China's ultimate goal is to compete with the U.S. dollar as the world's exclusive currency. It is doing so because, well, because it can. It's that big, its economy that large. Russia, on the other hand, has been pushing to de-dollarize now since 2013 or so. It is doing so because it feels that the U.S. and Europe has given them no other choice, what with all the sanctions and the other acts of hostility as they see it. But now Russia, seeing what is happening to the U.S. economy, is doubling down and doing so in gold. Here's that story from Moscow with RT correspondent Yulia Shapovalova.
Nowadays, Russia's domestic refineries use approximately 30% of their capacity. Among the main factors hindering the development of the country's precious metals market is the import VAT. Now, Russia's lower house of parliament plans to adopt a new law. According to it, 20% VAT on imported precious metals will be scrapped. As a result, the volume of gold production in the country is expected to double. Nowadays, about 300 tons of gold are processed in Russia annually. According to the latest data published by the Ministry of Finance, in 2019, gold mining in the country increased by more than 9% compared to the previous year. Plus, with no 20% VAT on precious metals imports, additional volumes of raw gold will come from Africa, Central Asia and Latin America. Therefore, more precious metals will be refined in the country in the future, and that will positively affect employment of the population, since an increase in the production capacity will require an increase in the number of jobs. The move is also expected to create an investment gold market in Russia, according to experts. As a financial instrument, gold is protected from inflation, and at a time of geopolitical risks and financial instability due to the coronavirus pandemic, the metal could be an excellent substitute for traditional investments in US dollars. At the same time, since April 1st, 2020, the Bank of Russia has suspended indefinitely the purchase of gold on the domestic precious metals market. According to experts, that decision was expected. First, in more than 5 years, Russia's gold reserves have more than doubled. During all those years, Russia was getting rid of US government bonds and buying gold with the proceeds from that. Secondly, now there is simply no additional money in the budget for that due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Basically, during the crisis, as the price of gold is high, its purchase apparently is no longer a priority for the Bank of Russia. By the way, as of May 1st, 2020, the country's gold reserves accumulated by the central bank were worth $126 billion. That's more than 20% of the total number of foreign reserves of the country. We all know gold prices have been growing drastically recently. Just a year ago, an ounce of the precious metal cost $1,300 at global stock markets. Now it's more than $1,700. Currently, the US has the most gold reserves in the world, more than 8,000 tons. Russia's fifth, with nearly 2,300 tons. That's nearly 74 million ounces of gold possessed by the country's central bank. Yulia Shapovalova, RT.
You heard Yulia mention in her report what's going on with COVID-19. Well, there's an update. Today, growing concerns over a resurgence of coronavirus cases as states are beginning to reopen. Is it the reopening that is causing this? This is what a lot of folks are thinking. 21 states are now reporting an increase in new coronavirus cases, and at least a dozen states are seeing a drastic influx in hospitalizations. Some states nearing capacity once again. Is this going to lead into another, well, push public officials to ask for another lockdown? For more on this, we bring in RT's Trinity Chavez.
As states are reopening, cities and counties across the country are warning of a surge in new coronavirus cases and hospitalizations. This as the total number of infections in the U.S. surpasses 2 million. Today, coast to coast, pushing ahead with reopening plans, even as experts warn of a potential second wave of COVID-19.
Even though we in the Northeast have ridden the first wave, that doesn't mean it's over by any count.
Some medical experts warning the U.S. could surpass the 200,000 death toll by September. Florida, Texas, Arizona, and California among the 21 states seeing an increase of cases. Texas reporting over 2,500 new coronavirus cases, the highest one-day total since the pandemic began. And 1 month into Florida's reopening, this week the state reported more than 8,500 new coronavirus cases, the most of any 7-day period. This as at least 12 states are reporting an increase in COVID-19 hospitalizations. Arizona's daily tally of cases has abruptly spiked in the last 2 weeks, hitting its all-time high. The state now reporting hospitals are around 83% capacity. California's hospitalizations also hitting their highest mark since May 13th.
What we have is actually a lot of micro-epidemics occurring across the country, and each one has their own drivers and their own reasons for happening.
Some experts say the surge of new cases is linked to Memorial Day festivities, when hundreds packed restaurants, pools, beaches, and parks during the holiday weekend. And in the wake of the nationwide protests following the death of George Floyd in police custody, many now wondering what will happen in the coming weeks.
My hope is that people are still practicing, social distancing, wearing their masks, being smart, being safe.
Now, while there could be several reasons as to why we are seeing new hotspots emerge throughout the country, one thing is for sure, the resurgence of cases could cause officials to scale back on reopening, and if hospitals hit capacity, it could cause a state to close down once again. Reporting in New York, Trinity Chavez, RT.
Imagine pretending to be a CIA agent and, at least for a while, getting away with it. This is a crazy story. Listen to this. A former head of public affairs for the Drug Enforcement Administration, in other words, a guy who used to work like marketing for the DEA, and then later he became a producer for a tabloid entertainment show, TMZ, on Fox, the network Fox, not Fox News, was arrested and charged with orchestrating an elaborate scheme in which he posed as an undercover CIA operative and then scammed $4 million out of government contractors who apparently bought his game, bought his story. This is nuts. Here's John Huddy with more on this.
Homeland, this is not. Unlike the hit Showtime series about CIA spies and operatives, this is the real-life story of a scam artist who managed to con government contractors and various companies into putting him on the payroll by posing as a CIA spy. A 22-page statement of facts by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Virginia alleges that 44-year-old Garrison Kenneth Courtney of Tampa, Florida, told about a dozen companies he was part of a secret CIA task force working on intelligence gathering, and that the companies needed to hire him to provide a, quote, commercial cover for his top secret and classified work. The Department of Justice claims he even provided fake documents and used unknowing public officials as part of his scheme, adding, quote, Courtney went to extraordinary lengths to perpetuate the illusion that he was a deep cover operative. Prosecutors say he diverted $4.4 million over 4 years, from 2012 to 2016, from the various companies that fell for his ruse. Courtney never worked for the CIA, but he was a public affairs chief for the DEA from 2005 to 2009, and he held a bunch of other jobs over his career, including reportedly a TV news reporter at one point, and even a producer for the celebrity gossip show TMZ on Fox. Courtney did apply for a job at the CIA around 2005, according to the DOJ, and was reportedly given a conditional offer, but never responded to it. During his scheme, he got a job as a private contractor for the National Institutes of Health Information Technology Acquisition and Assessment Center and was privy to classified information. And as if that wasn't enough, Courtney conjured up quite the story about his life as a spy and soldier in the Gulf War, claiming he had hundreds of confirmed kills, survived an assassination attempt by a foreign intelligence service, and sustained lung injuries from oil field smoke during the Gulf War. Actually, Courtney, who is 44, would have been in high school at the time of the Gulf War and only joined the Navy after the war had already ended, and he suffered lung damage from forest fires in Montana as a youth. It was only after some of the companies started questioning why the CIA wasn't paying them for their contracts with Courtney that the fraud apparently unraveled. Garrison Courtney, who also went by the alias Glenn Nelson and Gary Pearson, pled guilty to wire fraud and faces up to 20 years in federal prison. For the News with Rick Sanchez, John Huddy.
I guess if you're going to try and tell a lie, make sure it's a whopper. Make sure it's a really big one. Seemed to work for this guy for a while. Wow. This is Rick Sanchez. You're watching our special coverage on this Friday edition, and we will be right back. Welcome back. Europe today openly criticizing the United States. I know that's not something you hear every day because, well, heck, for the most part, the U.S. and the EU, European Union, act like besties most of the time. But today, the EU is saying it has very serious concerns with the Trump White House and what the Trump White House is doing. So here, let me set this up for you. Here's what this is really all about. So the International Criminal Court is investigating whether war crimes occurred during the Afghanistan war and whether they were committed by, say, the Taliban or Afghan forces or U.S. forces. They're looking at everybody, or U.S. contractors. But upon hearing this, President Trump immediately put a kibosh on this by putting sanctions that essentially punishes anybody who comes before this court as a witness, threatening anyone who assists the criminal court's investigation in any way if it looks into the actions of any U.S. soldiers or U.S. citizens. Is the EU right for questioning Trump, or is Mr. Trump right? We're going to debate this. But first, here is RT correspondent Alex Mihaljevic.
It may be okay for people of other nations.
The crime which you have been convicted of is of significant gravity.
But when the U.S. is accused of war crimes, the one-time supporter of the International Criminal Court says its citizens are not subject to the same rules.
Rest assured that the men and women of the United States Armed Forces will never appear before the ICC, and nor will they ever be subjected to the judgments of unaccountable international bodies.
Even though the United States was a signatory of the treaty which established the ICC in 2002, just weeks before it took effect, the George W. Bush administration withdrew from the international agreement. The reason? The U.S. was concerned that a court outside of America's borders would have jurisdiction over its citizens. The Trump administration is echoing the sentiment.
The ICC cannot subject Americans to arrest, prosecution, and jail. The U.S. is not a party to the Rome Statute that created the ICC, and even if a prosecution were to proceed, it would make a mockery of due process.
However, even after President Bush pulled out of the agreement, there have been times that the U.S. has worked with the International Criminal Court. The Obama administration assisted in ICC investigations, including helping to expose human rights abuses in Sudan's Darfur region. But now, things are different. Trump's beef with the International Criminal Court is an investigation that was greenlit in March. The world's only standing war crimes tribunal is looking into alleged misconduct by U.S. troops in Afghanistan. The probe zeroes in on crimes against humanity, including torture, rape, and other alleged misdeeds by American forces during the war in Afghanistan and at CIA interrogation facilities in countries including Poland, Lithuania, and Romania, all who are ICC member states. Following this precedent, the U.S. could also be investigated for similar crimes in Iraq and for assisting Saudi Arabia in its brutal Yemen campaign. Currently, the ICC has 123 member countries, including major U.S. allies such as the United Kingdom, France, and Canada. Even with friends on board, the latest investigation seems to have irritated the Trump administration to the point where it's lashing out.
Trump administration is taking the following actions. First, we're authorizing the imposition of economic sanctions against ICC officials directly engaged in ICC efforts to investigate U.S. personnel or allied personnel against that allied state's consent, and against others who materially support such officials' activities.
And second, the U.S. is imposing visa restrictions on officials involved in the investigations and their family members. Although the Trump administration may insist that Americans are not subject to the court since the U.S. pulled out of the Rome Statute, things don't necessarily work that way. American citizens can be subject to the ICC's jurisdiction in investigations of crimes that are committed in countries that are members of the court, such as Afghanistan. In fact, there is nothing unusual about this. As with all countries, if U.S. citizens commit a crime abroad, they are subject to a foreign court's jurisdiction. Many believe the U.S. sanctions against the court undermine this global order, while diminishing the power of sanctions which are usually reserved for terrorists and dictators, and not organizations trying to uphold the law. For News with Rick Sanchez, I'm Alex Mihailovich.
Joining us now, Ned Ryan, CEO of American Majority. Also joining us, former UP MP George Galloway. George, I kind of think I know where you're going to fall on this, but I'm not quite sure where Ned stands. So Ned, why don't you throw out the first salvo here?
Well, no, I mean, we've never, as Pompeo said, we're not part of the Rome Statute. We have always fought the ICC's attempts to assert jurisdiction over U.S. military personnel. And again, I would reiterate, George W. Bush, who I wrote for, was exactly right. We were not going to be part of the ICC for fear that it would target military personnel. And the real question, the real debate here, Rick, is over national sovereignty. The U.S. is not going to surrender some sovereignty to some international court. And if they insist on trying to assert control, this is why you're seeing the Trump administration push back. If you would like to try and do this, we will revoke visas for you, your family members, and we'll freeze your assets. You can't have it both ways. You can't target U.S. military personnel as war criminals and then try and enjoy all the privileges and benefits of this country.
George, to you.
This is a court we're talking about. Judges, legal officials. I mean, you can't appoint yourselves as the world's policeman, but refuse to go to a court and threaten a scorched earth towards the court if they have the gall to prosecute crimes that were committed in a country which is a member of the court. These alleged crimes took place in Afghanistan. It is a member of the court. Therefore, the court has every right to examine allegations of war crimes in the long conflict still going on in Afghanistan. And as to sovereignty and refusing to allow, look, Julian Assange is a personal friend of mine. The same people who are taking this approach to any idea of sending an American accused to a court in The Hague are the very people demanding that my friend must be sent by Britain to the United States to disappear for the rest of his life for publishing documents which revealed war crimes.
Ned, to you.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we're talking about a question of legitimacy, and do we actually recognize this court? We never have, Rick. We have never recognized their legitimacy to assert jurisdiction over U.S. military personnel.
Why not?
So that's the issue. We've never given it to them.
Why not?
But, well, I would ask, why would we? This is about national sovereignty. We're not going to let them target U.S. military personnel who were sent there. And I think the bigger argument, we can't talk about it too much, but is, again, why were we even sending people to Afghanistan and Iraq? I would quibble with that. But they were sent by their commander-in-chief and by their generals. But I will say this, Rick, if you're going to quibble about the United States pushing back, we should talk about Russia. We should talk about China. We should talk about all these other countries that are also not part of the ICC, again, because of the issue of national sovereignty.
Is your problem just with U.S. troops? What about contractors? What about some of these contractors we hear about who've done some pretty awful things in different places? If they happen to have U.S. citizenship, they can't be held by a court either?
No, who are being held accountable, who have to face charges in this country, Rick, who are being held accountable. That's what Pompeo stressed. He stressed that very issue.
So, Galloway, to you, George, can we, he's saying, look, we should trust the United States. Our court system is every bit as good, if not better, than the World Criminal Court, so let us handle it. We're going to be doing, we'll do it right.
Well, look, you're entitled not to extradite your accused people to The Hague. That is your national sovereignty. But what's being done here is to threaten the International Court from even investigating cases of alleged war crimes. That's completely unconscionable. It has further divided Europe from the United States. If the United States is content to lose every friend it's ever had in the world, then go ahead. The Paris Accords, the Iran nuclear deal, the Nord Stream 2, the International Criminal Court, go ahead. Burn everything. Tell everyone to go and get lost. But don't expect to be loved at the end of it, Rick.
Well, Ned, to you, does he make a good point, George?
Well, no, those are all issues, of course, which that's why Trump was elected. We didn't want to be part of the Paris Accord. We didn't want to be we disagree with Nord Stream 2. And I will say this, Rick, at the end of the day, economic interests will continue alliances and friendships moving forward. Trust me, people will still want to do business with the United States for economic reasons, so spare me some of this.
So in the end, the guy who has the gold has the power. Well said.
Right.
My thanks to you, Ned. My thanks to you, George. What a wonderful conversation with two really smart guys defending their points of view. Thank you again. That was a hell of a debate, wasn't it? Wasn't that a good debate?
I liked it. Well,
I mean, going back and forth, and to hear
that one
Galloway talking like that.
That one guy was a maniac, but yeah, it was a good debate.
No, he's a decent guy. He just, listen, it's his point of view. Are you talking about Galloway?
No, I love Galloway.
Kidding.
Galloway's awesome.
So, Lee Kant, we got 2 minutes for you to tell me what's going on with Redacted tonight. I understand you got a barn burner coming.
Let's see how much we can squeeze in here. Yeah, I did the 15, 16 facts about American policing that'll blow your mind. Some of them I'm sure you've covered on this show. You know, American police kill roughly 1,000 Americans a year after year. In other countries, you know, in the UK, they average like 3 to 7 a year. In Denmark and Switzerland, they often go a whole year without killing anyone.
So what was the number here?
1,000.
1,000 in the U.S.
And 0 in certain other countries, Denmark, Switzerland. Can you believe they let everyone live? Why would they do that? It's crazy, right? And then I also get into like the prosecution rate, which we don't often talk about. Oh, from 2005 to 2019, NBC also reported on this. 3 officers were actually convicted of the highest crime of murder. 3 out of 14,000 Americans killed or something?
Yeah.
3. That's a prosecution success rate of 0.021%.
I saw that stat. Less than 1% of officers who've ever been involved in anything questionable have ever been prosecuted.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then I get into the training, which training in police forces across America, they average 100 some hours on how to shoot their weapon and 8 hours on de-escalation. So they learn a lot how to kill people, very little how to not kill people, how to avoid killing people.
And trained by Army Rangers and guys who are coming back from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, which is like, are we Iraqi citizens? Yeah.
People with PTSD out on the streets.
It's kind of like, but we're not enemies. I'm not the enemy of a police officer. Why are you training him by somebody who was in a war with our enemies?
I agree. And also, if you compare it to training of other professions, like in most states, hairstylists need more training than cops are mandatory must have. And
wow.
In Michigan, for example, it's 600 hours for police. It's 4,000 hours to work with electrical signs. Electrical signs.
See what I mean? Barn burner, loaded for bear, Lee Kemp, redacted tonight. A lot of numbers. Thanks, guy. Appreciate it. That's it for us. Good night.